Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining the session today. Our second session for this week. The first one was on Tuesday, then we have today as well. For those that are joining for the first time, we always run these sessions. This is a regional initiative by PMI to handhold our PMP candidates to as you are seeking to take your PMP exams after you've gotten your 35 contact hours, and even those that are aspiring, we're also here to support. Also, that's why we're having these sessions. These are review sessions. They are not meant to replace the official training sessions that you've undergone with ATPs. These are high-level sessions where we just go over specific topics, and today we're looking at changes in projects, a few artifacts, and also managing issues in the projects as well. That's related to changes as well. So we partnered with our authorized trainers in the region from different areas, different countries. They come in and they do a session where they talk about the topics on a high level. We have a moment to discuss the questions that are arising and even a few sample PMP questions. And then we get to hear from you as well. If you need any questions, if you have any questions and you need clarity on them, we also get to hear on that, and our instructor will be able to respond. So before I pass it on to Emmanuel, who is our instructor today from Ghana, he will take us through the session. I would just like to ask that we post on the chat where we're joining us from today. If you can just share briefly where you're joining us from and when you're sitting for the PMP exam as well, that would be great. And then we should be able to start in a few seconds. So feel free to post on the chat where you're joining us from. Okay. Right. Lagos, Nigeria, welcome. Ghana, okay. Uganda, Livingston, welcome. Okay, feel free to keep posting. Okay. All right, and wishing all the best. Tell you you're taking exam tomorrow. After this session, you should just really go get some rest. It's important you get enough rest before your exam tomorrow. So try and ensure you get that. And we're wishing you all the best as well. Okay, keep posting on the chat. I will pass it on to Emmanuel. Emmanuel, you can proceed now.
All right, so good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all of you from the various places from which you are joining. And we wish you all the best in your endeavors, those who are just about sitting their PMP exams. This session, as we have been told, is not to replace your rigorous learning that is required for your preparation. This is only going to be a touch-up. It's going to be an approach to help you familiarize, get comfortable, and be able to relate very well with particular topics. And so I'll just go straight into the business for today. And I'm hoping that by the time we're through with this, you'll find that you have benefited a bit from this session. Hopefully, you'll be able to make good use of the learnings from this session. All right, so thanks very much for joining once again. And the topic for this afternoon or this evening, or depending on wherever you are, is effective change, artifact, and issue management in projects. So I'm going to try not to make it too theoretical, because you've gone for your 35 contact hours, you've read, and I mean, just as you all know, the PMP exam is not just theoretical. It tests your grit under pressure. It tests how you are going to make decisions under pressure. And for those of you who are going to write the exam later on, you know that as from next month in July, we're going to have the introduction of the next edition, and which will also incorporate a few more things like sustainability, AI, and the rest. So this particular afternoon session, we'll be talking about managing project changes. We'll be talking about managing project artifacts, and then determining the methodologies and practices that we're going to make use of in our projects. You know, obviously, that you as a project manager have to tailor all of these to suit the particular project. So for instance, the methodologies that we're going to make use of, the processes that we're going to go through in executing our project. For a large project, say for a well-band project that is covering the entire, the entire West Africa or something like that over 10 years, would have a different way of a different rigor or a different approach to it compared to something that has to do with perhaps preparing for a birthday party. Okay, so it's important that we know that we have the power to tailor, and all of these skills and intuitions, all of these are skills that PMI wants us to imbibe into ourselves, so that when you are asked as a project manager what you need to do next, we all think in the same line. So hopefully this session is going to help you tune your mind to a few other things that you may have covered or may not have thought of in that regard. Now, to start with, first things first, I know you've all introduced yourselves, where you're joining from, some from Uganda, Kenya, Ghana, and the rest. So I'm going to introduce myself, and then we're going to go into it. So my name is Emmanuel Hazel. I'm from Ghana. I have I've built my project management career across the globe. So my background is in engineering. So I'm a mechanical engineer by background, and I have practiced project management from the ground up. I actually did start off with oil well drilling. So I've been managing drilling operations over the last couple of years, trying to drill oil for various countries in East Africa, West Africa, complex situations. But also I have the knack for continuous improvement. And so about 14 years back, I founded a company called SigmaStrat. And SigmaStrat is also a management consulting firm that focuses on strategy, continuous improvement, and project management. So over the years, we've churned out quite a number of project managers, and hoping that through the learnings I have gotten from the participants of our trainings and through my own experience, I'll be able to share a few things, a thing or two with you that will be of benefit to you. So I am a PMP holder. I'm an MBA because of the business I'm running, and I'm a chartered engineer with the UK Engineering Council. And lately, I've been mentoring British engineers on getting them enrolled into the Engineering Council, British and other international engineering, engineering professionals, reviewing and helping them, coaching them, and helping them on board into the UK Engineering Council. All right, so that's a bit about me. I've done this over 18 years plus, and so hopefully we'll be able to get through this safely. So you're in safe hands, and I'm sure that with your perspectives, the perspectives that you bring on board, will be able to make something meaningful out of this. So, this topic has to do with quite a number of things, but one of them is about issues, right? And I'm a lot of you know what issues are. When you identify risks at the beginning, it's not because you are planning to fail. It is because you are planning what you will do in order to keep the project on track if the risk event occurs, right? We all know what the risk is, which is anything that is uncertain. So an uncertain event, which if it occurs, could have a positive or negative impact on your project. And so at the beginning of your project and throughout the execution of your project, you identify risks. Most of them you will identify from the beginning of the project, right? And then as you go along, as the project becomes progressively elaborated, you understand some more nuances, you get more stakeholders, you are able to now think of with your team some more risks. Now, where do these risks sit? I'd like to have this as a very interactive session because you all know the theory. So I'd like us to be putting our answers in the chat box, putting questions in there, throwing in contributions and all of that. Where do these risks sit? Okay. I'm not seeing answers. Where do these risks sit? When you identify risks during your project, where do they sit? Good. Risk register, great. Risk register, great. So the risk registers have one. So basically, when you identify risks at the beginning of the project, when you are actually, planning your project, when you identify these risks, you put them in a risk register. Note, a risk register is not a dead document. A risk register is not a document that we prepare and then put on the shelves until we are done with the entire project, and then we sort of try to clean the dust and take it away. No, it is a living document, right? So a risk register is some deliverable that is going to be alive throughout your entire project. Now, that risk is something you are not planning for it to happen. You are planning so that when it happens, you are going to have a well-defined plan, an execution plan to deal with it. So you, for instance, say that, well, I'm going to do a farm. If it rains earlier than the rainy season, then I'm going to have to, cover the farm because my crops do not require too much rain. So your uncertain event is that the rain may fall earlier than you anticipated. And so your response is that if the rain comes in perhaps earlier than we anticipated, then we're going to apply this particular response, which is to cover the farm, to cover the greenhouse so that too much rain doesn't go on the crops. That is your risk response, and it's sitting on your risk register. Now, if in the course of your project the risk materializes, then that becomes an issue. So when that risk becomes an issue, that also has to be recorded somewhere. And that is where, as the first person who answered put it, it goes into the issue log. Sele put it there. It goes into the issue log. So your issues move from your risk register and go into your issue log. The issue log is also another document. It's also another artifact. It's also some deliverable that you're going to make use of in the course of your project. Now, I'm sort of segueing and trying to broaden your horizon on what we're actually doing. So project management is not theoretical. So you have a living document right? Now you have a risk register. It is alive. It's growing as your project goes along. But how are we going to determine which version of the risk register we're dealing with? So for instance, we started a project last year. We documented all the risks, and we have not we've been updating it randomly. So the project manager or somebody that the project manager has designated has been updating it randomly. Okay, so we need to know when the last time it was that we updated it. Sometimes in the artifact or in the document, you will have control. So in your risk register, you probably have the date on which you entered the risk and the status and all of that. But you may have other artifacts within your project, such as perhaps an engineering drawing, such as a red line markup, such as a procedure, right? Those ones, as we go along, as we see changes occur in the project, we need to be able to distinguish between the original plan and what we are on right now. We need to be able to distinguish between, if we wanted to find out which particular project plan, which particular engineering drawing I was working on, there has to be a way we'll be able to figure out whether I'm working on the right engineering drawing or I'm working on the engineering drawing that we did 2 years ago. So that is where managing of your artifacts come in. And so we're going to discuss it in detail as we go along. So this was by way of introduction. We've been doing training across the globe. In fact, over 6 African countries we have lined up for the rest of the year, where we go to various countries, have them in person, and we also do online versions of the training. Our next one is on 20th. So just just by the way. All right, so I will zoom straight into what I want to present, and I want you to move along with me as we go through this together, and hopefully you will be able to enjoy the session. All right, so let me move over to talk about the content of our discussion, and then I'll give you an interactive quiz to go through. All right, so I'm sure that quite a number of you are involved in projects, right? So if any of you is involved in a project, I will expect to hear contributions from you. Over the next sessions, I want to talk about what the exam content outline is looking like, so that you'll be able to see how important this session is. From July, when we start implementing the new exam content outline, about 40% of the questions will come through the waterfall approach. And 60% will then go through the adaptive and hybrid approach. So you need to strengthen your understanding of how the projects are run in adaptive and hybrid as well. Okay, so it's important that you don't just stick to what you know about the predictive or the waterfall approach, but you also understand a bit more about the agile, so that you can score quite a number of points. You know what it is: 180 questions. 170 of them are scored, and the 10 are unscored for benchmarking. You have 240 minutes to run through, and you have about you have 2 10-minute breaks. So I won't bother you with that. So before I even progress, let me get you to look at this screen. You can actually scan this QR code and join me in running through this. Okay, so you can copy this QR code, or you can scan this QR code, or go to menti.com, Good. Excellent. So I see 8 people are logging in, and very soon we'll start answering the question. What keeps project managers up at night on projects in your country? I'm sure that from various perspectives, as project management professionals or people aspiring to have the credential, you've had keen interest in how projects are managed in your country. So let's see what you think. What's your expert opinion? What keeps project managers up at night on projects in your country? Risks, good. Uncertainty, stakeholder management. Yeah, you could have some very complicated stakeholders. Good, excellent, perfect. Issues. Yeah, you're thinking what if this risk materializes into issues? I like that. I'm seeing complexity. Sometimes the project becomes very complex. Now there's a distinction between a project that is complicated and a project that is complex. All right. So as we go along, somebody should find that out and tell us. There's a difference between a project that is complicated and there's a project that is complex. So let's talk about it. Excellent. So from various countries, people are thinking about scope creep. Yes, scope creep. When scope is changing without commensurate changes to the baseline or the budget. And these are things that we're going to discuss in terms of when we start talking about project changes, okay? These are some of the things we'll be discussing when we talk about project changes, where even particularly in our context, you could have a situation where you're running a project and perhaps it's a government related project, and you have people in authority who may have, very high power and very, very high influence, and who probably may be the project sponsor telling you, you know what, yeah, we are building the road project. We had anticipated that we'll do only 4 kilometers. I mean, if you have the wherewithal, why don't you increase it to 5 kilometers? So we're going to be thinking about how scope creep actually comes into play, what your role as a project manager tends to do in sort of trying to control that scenario, and how you are able to manage that. So I like what I'm seeing. So, the project managers don't sleep at night, I guess, from all that I'm seeing here, 78, all of these things that I'm seeing here, it's quite interesting. Great. So let's go to the next question. I'll try and get a shot of this so we can use that as our baseline for the discussion. Great stuff. Great stuff. Excellent. So I'm seeing that a lot of these are recurrent in our projects, right? You think that project managers, project managers think about uncertainty, think about issues, think about budget, stakeholder management. You can have some complex stakeholders, and we want to make sure that we are also considering that. Okay, let me see some of the insights coming from the all right, good, excellent. So let's go to the next question. All right. So right now, on a project you are involved with, how accurately does the change log reflect what has actually changed? So here, think about the project you are involved in, and let's see how accurately the change log reflects what has actually changed. In our part of the world and globally in many projects, you see that the project changes occur in projects, and sometimes the project manager does not have a good handle on it. So by the time we are through with the project looks looks very different from what we actually planned. And there is no change log for us to track. That is a trap that we want to avoid. And these are some of the things you need to think about when you're sitting in the exam room. Where a change occurs, there has to be a particular place, a particular person in charge of it, and a particular way we can figure out where and how those changes came to be. You can have a project which involves a government, right? Say you're working on a project, perhaps let's say a hospital building project, and your country's minister for works and housing is in charge of it. He's a big stakeholder, and you want to impress them, but you have a budget, you have a timeline, you have a fixed budget, a fixed timeline, you have a fixed quality and everything. And then perhaps the minister comes to you and say, you know what, can you build, you know, we know it wasn't part of the plan, but if you can add an oxygen unit to each of the hospitals, I think it will do a great favor to all of us. And you know what, you never know what could come out of this. Now, when you are in such a dilemma as a project manager, running a project that has been paid for by the government, that has been sanctioned, you have your project charter, it tells you the amount involved, the timeline, everything fixed. And then the minister comes to convince you that you think you have the capability, and there's nothing documented about it. What do you think could happen at the end of the project? Every change that would have occurred by the time the project ends, which is not documented, actually makes room for perhaps a dispute later on, perhaps an audit issue later on, perhaps something that you didn't anticipate later on. However, in the course of executing that, you probably will not think about it that way. That is the reason why it's important that we as project managers have a hold on our project change control. All right. So it's actually something within our terrain. It's something that we really need to pay particular attention to, that we don't allow changes to take place in our projects without it being documented, without it being documented, assessed, reviewed, approved, or rejected. So it's a very key thing that as a project manager, it's your responsibility to manage. Now, in most projects, you'd realize that there should be what we call a change control board. Now, so far since we started, I've talked to you about changes that occur. I've talked to you about risks and issues. And then I've talked to you about the fact that when changes occur, they have to be documented. And there has to be a way that you are reviewing those projects, okay, those changes, so that later on they don't come to bite you. And that's the whole idea behind you being a project manager, different from any other person who is calling themselves a project manager who has not gone through this course, this session. Okay, so we talked about this. So now let me zoom into the first block that we'll be talking about, which is managing and controlling of changes. And I've tried to link most of the things to both the 2026 exam content outline and the 2020 and the previous exam content outline, so that you have the perspective. All right. So just look at it. It's a knowledge building exercise for all of us. Now, as a project manager, it is your responsibility to execute the change control process. All right. You are supposed to enable, you are a servant leader, and you are supposed to enable the project to be successful. And so it is your duty to execute the change control process. It's your duty to communicate the status of project changes. All right. And then to implement approved changes to the project and update project documentation to reflect the changes. These are practical things that we do as project managers, isn't it? They are practical. They're things that we have to make sure we have a hold of. But remember that as a project manager, you are responsible for the success or failure of the project. You are responsible for the success or failure of the project. So when you're sitting behind the exam and you're thinking about the question, if the question has to do with perhaps something that could cause the failure of the project, know that you are responsible. You are expected to take some action. So if you're a project manager and you have a question and your first instinct is to escalate the problem to your project sponsor, think twice. That is probably not going to end the way you want it to be. So you think about how you take control of your project. So that is one cue you need to have in under exam conditions, trying to think about the project, trying to make sure that you have control over the project. It only goes beyond you when it is beyond your capability or beyond your authority as a project manager. So now, as a project manager, your responsibility being that you have to execute the change control project process means that for every project, we're thinking that we have what we call a change control board. A change control board is a selection of people who have the authority to review change requests, to analyze them, to evaluate and approve or delay or reject the change request. Okay. Now, when the committee has reviewed the project change request, and they have come to the consensus that this change request must be rejected, it is your duty as the project manager to then communicate the status of that change request. That is the point number 2, communicating the status of the proposed changes. All right. Now, you implement approved changes. So if the change control board comes to the conclusion that, right, we have all agreed, we have all analyzed the impact of the change requested, and we think that it is valid, we will make allocation for finances for you to do it. We will re-baseline the project so that your project does not look spuriously as if it has lagged, but your project will be on track, and therefore we want the change to go ahead. It is your duty to communicate that project change. Again, it's your duty to implement the approved change to the project. So yes, we planned initially, the original baseline was to build a 5-kilometer road. Based on the need of the community and stakeholder requirements, the minister has made a change request. Now, because you're a good project manager, you didn't just listen to the minister's change request, nod, and then go and execute without prior approval, without any evidence to the effect that it is the minister who requested you to make those changes, and it was evaluated, and it is actually a legitimate change that has been requested of you, and it's been approved. If you don't have any documentation to prove that, that is something below the waterline, as we will talk about, which will surface to bite you. And I don't think any of us would want to be bitten by something we were trying to do in goodwill. That is why it's important that we manage and control changes. We have our change control process, all right? And that's what we want to do. So now let me go to, let me show you a different screen, and then let's think about some of the things that could go into your project, that some of the things that you could be looking at, which are actually below the waterline. You don't necessarily see them happening, but they will end up resulting in a change that can affect you, and you want to make sure that that does not actually take place. So what are some of the things you think could take place that will end in a change that you didn't bargain for? A change that you didn't bargain for. So you can put it in. I use the example of the minister who has a lot of power telling you what you've got to do, and and you implementing it without documenting it. So what are some of the things that you could, you know, unknowingly or knowingly or unknowingly get yourself into that will end up in a change that you didn't bargain for? Anybody wants to hazard a guess? Anybody? Good. Onesimus has given an answer. Onesimus, okay, you have your hands up. All right. Why did you speak?
I think one of the things that can happen since such a usual also part of the baseline, so there will be an over budget, or there will be delayed a milestone.
A delayed milestone will be something you didn't bargain for, right? And it ends up happening. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. Somebody else was trying to speak. Who wanted to contribute?
I did. Essie.
Essie, good.
So your question was what to demand or make you do a change that has not been approved or budgeted for?
Yes.
So I wrote regulatory directives. For example, in the process, those of us in the tech environment, you know, we started working with certain applications before the ISO certification directive came. And there was that demand that a consultant or vendor was required to have an ISO certification. And it's this is costs. It requires cost. It requires scope change because the business case at the time didn't take into consideration a vendor or a consultant that needs to be ISO certified. So when we started the project, within just the first phase in the Q1 environment, we have to make sure we raise a new business case to get approval from the sponsor for us to bring in an ISO certified vendor and onboard that vendor. That is why I stated regulatory directives.
Perfect. Perfect. And Essie, while you are at regulatory directives, what kind of, and anybody can chime in, what kind of environmental factor is a regulatory directive?
It's an EEF.
Excellent. It's an enterprise and environmental factor, right? Your enterprise is that closed organization. You were trying to execute a project, and all of a sudden there was a government directive. If you're going to do any job for the government, you have to have certain requirements. So that EEF, ACES project, this is a practical example of how EEFs have come to modify their original plan. All right. So what we are discussing is a very practical thing. So if you're in a different project, you may also talk about some of the an example of an enterprise environmental factor. You can use ACES example to remind yourself of what an example of an enterprise environmental factor could be. But let's come back to our point. Now you'd see on my screen, and you know, in the new exam content outline, there is what we talk about, the AI, using AI in project management. There's the sustainability, and that makes project management even more interesting. Recently, I've been using a lot of AI. Obviously, AI has to have the human in the loop. The human has to have the competency to curate what the AI does and to ensure that the AI is churning or is speeding up what the human wants to do, not the other way around. I've decided that in the next couple of months, or in the next couple of weeks, I'll be writing an article on whether AI is learning from humans or humans are learning from AI, because I've seen lately people's way of speaking, even trying to simulate how AI speaks. So I'll be releasing that on my LinkedIn profile. So those of you who took a scan of the first page, you can connect to me on LinkedIn so that when I post it, you'll be able to read it. But now let's come to our change iceberg. What I've put together as a change iceberg here is some of the things that are hidden, that are below the waterline, is what I'm describing. You know what an iceberg is, right? An iceberg, yeah. So an iceberg, you will have the tip of the iceberg above the water, and then you will have the rest of it that we don't see below the water. Now, above the water, you will see your change requests. You may see formal scope updates. You may see documented schedule adjustments. So in ACE's project, for instance, there may be a schedule adjustment. There may be a rebaselining to say that, well, initially we hadn't accounted for paying $30,000 to a company to have us ISO certified, or whatever, $10,000 to get our company ISO certified. But now, because of a government directive, we have to do it if we're going to be working with the government. And so we have to now go and make a change request. You see, that tells you some of the sources of change requests. Okay, so now you have a change request that has come through. If ACE's project, which then asks you to, which then has you making changes to the baseline, is never documented anywhere, and they just go about, they just continue the project, and perhaps there's an accounting department that is drawing down the finances and paying for the new vendor to do the job. If ACE is the project manager, what you'd see is that your project will be successful, but at the end of the day, an audit of your project will reveal that there was a gap. Some money has been used that we never planned for. And then if you're the project manager and people are looking at the fact that you are in charge of it, you're going to have to end up answering that question. That is the reason why all change requests have to be documented. So all these things on the left-hand side, the approved change requests, we'll see them. Formal scope changes, we'll see them. Documented schedule adjustments, we'll see them. Now, let me reveal some of the hidden stuff that we may see. I'm going to click on it. Verbal scope additions from the sponsor can be something under the radar that you may not have actually, thought that was going to affect you. But this is the project sponsor. And beyond being the project sponsor who sanctioned the project, he's also the financial sponsor. So you probably intuitively think that, well, they have the power to tell you, maybe they will provide you the money. That's where people get it wrong. You don't make any assumptions in your project. And of course, you're not going to be able to make assumptions in your exam. One cue I give to all my participants when we do the training: do not import any extraneous meaning to the question. Work with only what has been given to you. Even if the question simulates something that you are going through in your project, don't assume that what is happening in your project is also happening in there. And don't import any new idea into the question, because the same way you are being tempted to import any new idea into your project is the same way the thousands of people who are sitting are going to be tempted to import new ideas into their question, into their simulation on the question. And at the end of the day, everybody cannot be right on that. So stick to what has been stated and given to you, and then answer the question based on it. Over in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a boot camp that will, do some exam preparation. So if you connect to us on LinkedIn, you may have the information about it. So basically, verbal scope additions from the project sponsor. Let me unveil this one. Team workarounds that were never logged. So you are running on a project. The project, and as you give examples, please, like AC gave, I will jump on the examples you give. All right. And I will also throw in examples from some of our other participants that we've trained. But if you want us to make examples of your project, then what you do is, as you contribute, you can use those examples, and then we will make reality out of them. So team workarounds that were never logged can be below the radar that you may not see. And then these are all changes that are taking place. But if you have not documented them, then these things are going to come back to bite you. Now, let's look at some of these other ones. Informal design revisions. So we decided that we're going to, let's say you were doing an agile project. And recently my team has been working on designing or designing some, working on some software. And in working on some software, there may be the opportunity to make revisions to them. If it is not documented, we'll end up having something completely different from what we started with. If it comes with the cost, we'll end up having some more cost than we had actually planned. And that's not what we want to achieve. So some of these things are just triggers for you to get to know that a lot of things could go wrong that you may not notice. That's why you have to have a handle on change control. And the fact that you are doing your change control doesn't mean you are skeptical. It means you are actually a good project manager that wants to ensure that all changes are logged. It is not a bureaucratic bottleneck you are putting in place for the project. It is actually something you're doing to save the project sponsor from their own enthusiasm, to save stakeholders from their own enthusiasm. Because remember, it's the same stakeholders who are going to evaluate the success of the project. And the fact that they suggested something doesn't mean that they are responsible for the failure of the project if you exist as a project manager. Another thing below the waterline that you have to look at for budget reallocations, which were never put on paper. All right, so we had a budget. We have a budget of $4 million. We had allocated $1 million for the procurement of the initial hardware. $2 million for the software deployment, and then the last $1 million for reviews and all of that. Then all of a sudden, one of the powerful project sponsors makes a curious suggestion for us to improve on the original plan. The key there is to improve. So it sounds fancy that, yeah, you're a project manager, you want it to be successful. So, well, let's get it improved. And then you end up moving money that was allocated for projects, procuring project software, part of the 2 million, to make adjustments or considerations for what the project sponsor wanted you to do, thinking that, well, as at now, we have cash flow to do it. But forgetting that at the end of your project, this is not being accounted for. It's not part of your plan for the 4 million. So at the end of the day, you would have supervised a scope creep and you didn't pick it up. That's why we want to know about scope creep and all of those things. Now, features slipped into the sprint without approval are some of the things within the water, below the water line and the likes. Favors done to client contacts outside the process. Oh, okay. So the process is quite arduous. The change control process is going to be long. The next time we're going to do a change review is in 2 weeks' time. And, we want more contracts from you. So you know what? We'll just start working on it. And while we think about the change control board, all of these are below the waterline. They may come back to haunt you if it is not documented somewhere, or if it's documented at the wrong time. Rework presented as new work. So you do the thing, you fail, and then you decide that let's correct it, and it's not being documented anywhere. You're implementing corrective actions without documenting them as change. All these PM decisions made without documentation. So you're a project manager, you're powerful, you are in charge of the success or failure of the project, and you end up not documenting some of the changes you're doing because you're driving. This is a moving vehicle and you're driving it, and so you don't have too much time, and you keep moving with changes. We call it in some parlance winging it. So you're winging it as you go along. Now, somebody should give me an example of something below the waterline. Just one example. What can we consider as something below the waterline that may not necessarily have been bargained for, that may not show up at the top of our waterline? Just one example, and I move on. What else? So look at the examples: verbal scope additions, team workarounds. Just type what you think. Good. What do you think? Okay. So there are quite a number of things below the waterline that you may be looking at. Favors done to rework, preserved. Good. Informal design revision. Yes. And now from an engineering perspective, we're doing some design revisions for some industrial firms, across Africa. And there are times when we did some work for a firm in West Africa, actually, in a French-speaking West African country. And what had happened was that they had built that infrastructure. Over the years, they've been making changes. So when a pipe is not working properly, when the pressure is playing up, they just get a fabricator, they just get some engineers, and then they weld and connect it, and it's all working all right. But guess what? The original plant had a blueprint. It had a layout, a routing of the piping and all of that. Now, over the years, because they want to continue producing, they decided just to make corrections on the go. They have money. They decide, okay, yeah, you know what, what's the budget for this? Okay, it's $20,000. Let's get somebody to come and fix the pipe so that we can continue producing. And along the line, they realized that, well, the next time somebody wants to go and improve on that particular segment of the plant, the only drawing they have is the original drawing they had 5 years ago, which is actually not relevant now. And so it means that anybody who wants to make a change to that particular part of the plant needs to actually come to the plant and actually physically measure stuff. And that's where our engineering firm came in, Zelco Engineering came in, to actually then help to what we call redline and redraft their drawings. So we redrafting, we're building their drawings for them, trying to go to the site, use a 3D laser scanner, scan it, and make a documentation as to what the current state is. And we're saying it's called the as-built state. So that is a documentation that the project manager will have to keep. Now, let's segue into how you configure your artifacts then. Now, looking at the fact that we at this point in the project I'm talking about, because of the fact that they hadn't documented the changes that they already had in place, and we have had to go in to do laser scanning to document, to help document exactly what the as-built state is. Now, that means that they will have two drawings, right? They will have the original drawing from a couple of years back, and then they will have the current drawing that we are working on. So that is where your configuration management comes in. You need to be able to distinguish between the two drawings. We need to be able to have a revision 0, for instance, for the original document, and a revision 1 for the one we are dealing with, so that if next time another project, another person wants to go and work at a particular area in the project, they will go and look for revision 1 and not revision 0. Okay, and they'll be working off of the right project document. That is how we manage artifacts. So that project document is an example of an artifact. and your revisioning or your revving, as we call it in local parlance, in parlance in engineering, is what you are trying to configure to ensure that your project is speaking the same language to everybody. Now, in Africa, we have a peculiar problem, and a couple of other countries do have it as well. I recently a couple of years back, I worked with I worked with a group of engineers, Japanese engineers. They were part of my project team, working on a global oil and gas project. And I noticed all of a sudden how various cultures could have an impact on a project, where people could be sitting around the table and you sitting at the head of the table as a project manager and discussing issues that they are competent about, other people are competent about, and because of cultural nuances, they end up just nodding in political agreement without actually technically agreeing to it. And so as a project manager, you have to be very much aware of cultural nuances. Okay, but that's just for the practical approach. I just wanted to draw your attention that mostly sometimes saying no to a senior stakeholder feels like insubordination. Yeah, the example I gave about the minister telling you, he's suggesting, he's not even, authoritatively commanding you, but you are the project manager and you feel privileged to be speaking to the minister, and the minister says, you know what, so I'm even going to make a promise to the people that you have decided that you're going to work one extra kilometer, so keep it up, keep up the good work, and let's keep going. As a project manager, through your project leadership and everything, and you are in charge of it, you're supposed to have it documented. Mr. Minister, that's a very good idea. What we can do is to log it and review it and make sure that we are all on the same page as to the cost effect, the effect in terms of cost, the impact of a project, so that we will run it through and make sure that the project does not get derailed. So I think it's a very good idea that you have brought up. I think if everything goes well, we should technically agree to it. So why don't you send me an email and we'll take it from there? That is your influencing tactic there. He verbally gave you some information that would have gone below the waterline, but you want to now move him on track because you are the project manager and you're responsible for executing the project change control. All right. And so you use that tactic to get him on track. You get him to document what he wants through an email. It is forwarded to the change control board. The change control board, first of all, assesses it, reviews it, and sees whether it will have an impact, checks whether they have budget for it, or if they don't, that they have allocation within the management reserve for the for us to get into those changes. And then if they approve it, you communicate it back to the minister. So you see how practical it is. All right, so every informal scope addition that is absorbed to avoid a difficult conversation is a debt that compounds until delivery. So you have it in mind. That's one of the quotes I want to put there. So Kelvin, you'd see that Kelvin will put that quote up there. You can feel free to share that quote. The project pays for it at the worst possible time. So have it in mind that change control process is not a bureaucratic refusal. The fact that he said it and you said, let's go through the change control process, it doesn't mean that you're being bureaucratic. It is actually a professional protection for the client. And it's a protection even against the enthusiasm of the project stakeholder themselves. All right, because you should think about this from the perspective of integrated change control. You know that project managers are supposed to be thinking in systems. We have to have a systems thinking approach, right? Systems thinking approach means that as I'm working on my project, I should be looking at the impact of my project on the next project. I should be looking at how other things surrounding me within the organization are going to impact on my project. All right. So the principle here I want to drum home is that integrated change control is important. It's a process that reviews all the requests for changes, approves the changes, manages the changes to deliverables, project documents, and the project management plan. No change, regardless of the perceived size, should bypass this integrated change control process. So as you sit behind the exam, think about it from that perspective, that no change goes without integrated change control. So if you have a question that tells you, all right, so you have a minister that tells you to do this, he's a very powerful person, he's actually part of the financial sponsors, and he has told you a change that will improve the lot of the project, and what do you do next? And you decide that, oh, you are a very great lady, you're a very great gentleman, you're a lifesaver, and because of that, because the person is the the powerful person, you want to go ahead with it. Well, what do you think would be happening? So let's look at this example. You are a PM, or you're a project manager on a 14-man government road infrastructure project in Accra. 6 months in, the client's technical director, so the client being perhaps the government, the technical director from the Ministry of Roads calls informally, calls you, hey, Mr. Project Manager, how are you doing? You people are doing a great job. We want to widen the carriageway by an additional lane on the northern section. It's a small change, so just add it. Let's just do it. We're going to go on radio and tell the people that it's being done. The contractor has already mobilized, they are already on their way coming to site. The design is also approved. No written request has been submitted. Nobody has written anything to you. What is the most appropriate first action? So this one is a giveaway. Now, let me show you the head and tail of this question. If you find it somewhere, you know how to go about it. Everything that will cause a change to your baseline, first things first, is that you need to evaluate the impact. Any answer that seeks to drive you straight into answering the question is derailing you. So any change to the original baseline requires an assessment. So look for the answer that talks about you assessing the impact of the change. So assess the impact first, or check with the team. The PMP requires you to redirect the change to the change control process before any analysis begins. All right. You have to redirect to the change control process before any analysis begins. Informal framing does not change the process. So the fact that it is informal, the fact that it's from a powerful person, the fact that the person is so close to it, the fact that everything has been set out in place for you, does not mean that you can go ahead and execute the project, execute the change. Redirect it to the change control process. That is where the assessment, the review is going to be done. So inform the technical director. So the real answer will be inform the technical director that all changes must follow the approved change control process before any action is taken. So you then log the request and initiate a formal change control process. So think about it when you're answering the project. Now let's look at a few of the places where you can have change requests. Well, you can have change requests as a matter of a corrective action, right? You can have a corrective action coming in, adjust the performance of a project work to realign it with the project. So example, so if there's an example that comes like replanning after a contractor mobilizes late to get back on schedule, it's a change. So look at how small things are considered as changes. We had planned the project. We had planned that the contractor was going to start on the 1st of June. The contractor has now notified us that he's going to be able to mobilize on the 11th of June or the 12th of June, which is tomorrow. Okay. Now, the fact that we had originally planned that it was going to take place on the 1st of June, and they are proposing that they're going to make it on the 11th of June. It's an update to your original plan. So it is a change. So don't let stuff go under the radar because they are a matter of course. It's a change. And remember, a change control process is not a bureaucratic thing. So when you're looking at the questions, don't make exceptions. look at the thing, make sure it goes through the change control process, and then get it approved, and then you can log that change. You then implement it and then report. Remember, we talked about the 4 things that you're responsible for. It could be a defect repair, it could be a preventive action, it could be an update. All of these are important for us when it comes to change management. And remember, this session that we are holding is not to reteach you what you have already learned. It's actually to hash on the most important part of the conversation. All right. So let's have it in mind as we progress through this. So we've talked about changes, where changes come from. We've said that there could be changes that are coming out of corrective actions, preventive actions, and the like. So I'll show you examples of some of these things as we go along. Remember that these change requests are live documents, or the change log is a live document. So the fact that a change was initiated at the beginning of the year doesn't mean that so right now when I ask you for where your changes are, you don't know where it is. All right. So it's important that we know that they are live documents. And if they are live documents, then they have to be configured in such a way that we can figure out the difference between the current version of the document and previous versions of it. Okay. All right, so now let's jump to artifacts and let's look at some examples of artifacts and how we manage them. All right, I'm trying to get my screen zoomed so you can actually see it. Perfect, it's responding. Good. Right, okay, so what is an artifact? What is an artifact? Anybody wants to type in an answer? Anybody wants to guess? What's an example of an artifact? What's an artifact and what's an example? Good. Hora, why don't you can speak. Hora.
Lessons learned register, I think.
Lessons learned register. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's an example. Artifacts are documents associated with the project. That's a good way to carve it so that you will be able to remember it. So a project charter. Okay, good. Well, documents. So we're all on the same page. We understand what these artifacts are in simple terms. So we're not going to go very technical and try and define it. That's not the whole idea of your exam and PMP and all of that. It is for you to know how to deal with these situations when they do occur. So when you have an artifact in a project, remember that artifact needs to be labeled. We need to know exactly which version of the artifact you're working to, so that we need to know who exactly is managing that artifact, who is supposed to update it. We all agree where that artifact is to be stored. Years back, I had a couple of engineers that I was working with, some young engineers that I had hired, and I would ask them, we would have a lessons learned review at the end of each week on that project. And you will ask the gentleman who was responsible for it. So that tells you that was somebody responsible for it. So where is the latest lessons learned tracker on the server? He says, no, sir. Where is it? It's on my PC. Why is it sitting on your PC when we've all agreed that it's going to be on the shared drive, because that's what it is for, the shared drive, so that all of us can have access to it, not on your PC. Because what happens is that if it's on your PC and it's not on the shared drive, and your PC, a risk there which can become an issue is that your PC can crash. If it's on a shared drive, we have mitigated that risk. We have reduced it because it will take a freak occurrence for the cloud to crash. So we're better mitigating our risk by loading it on the server. So this is just to tell you how practical project management is, right? So your artifacts need to be correctly labeled so that you can actually identify which is which. Now let's look at your role as a project manager there. You have to evaluate project status and manage project artifacts. That's your role there. Now, what are some of the enablers you have to do? You have to identify and tailor the needed artifacts, you as a project manager. But you remember that as a project team, you also have access to a project management office, right? A project management office may not necessarily be a big office. It may be a selection of individuals whose responsibility it is to ensure standards for your organization with regards to the project are all being adhered to. So if you have a system like that, well and good. If you don't have, because the project is so small, you don't have a dedicated project management office. Project manager, one of the enablers you have to ensure exists is to identify and tailor the needed artifacts. So you go to that project and you make sure that the project has a template for a project charter. In many industries, which are many old industries, you'd find that they have very experienced people who manage projects, but not many of them go through the PMI approach. So they'll say that yes, they are project managers, they are running projects, but you realize they may not even have a standard project charter. They may not even have it in a different format or with a different name. Now, it's your duty to ensure that you identify and tailor the needed artifacts. So the lessons learned register, what's going to go into it, how are we going to name it, how are we going to file it, who's going to be responsible for keeping it, where is it going to be stored, what's the numbering procedure. Ensure artifacts are created, reviewed, updated, and documented. So when I talked about the project in the West African country, the French-speaking West African country, where they have revision 0 for the original drawing, and we went in and did the revision 1 for the next drawing. That revision 1 is a reviewed update that has been now documented. The project manager on that side needs to demonstrate on his project, project change log that we have updated the drawings of this part of the plant to an as-built drawing, and we have named it revision 1. The revision 1 was dated 1st of May 2026. That is a change log. It is part of an original project, but we've made a change. It went through a change control board and it was approved to be done, and it was done. You also have to ensure accessibility of artifacts to all stakeholders. So you see, these 4 or 5 points, if you have them in mind and you have a question that talks about, we had a project lessons learned database, Mr. E had it on his computer, and he's a very, very responsible engineer, and he's very reliable. And so she's going to make sure that it's available when we need it. You should know that something's wrong there. Okay, so the project management mindset is that simple if you look at these things. So ensure accessibility of the artifacts. Make sure we all know where the artifact sits. Don't be like the engineer who had his artifacts sitting on his computer. Continually assess the effectiveness of artifact management. So in that situation where I had an engineer who had been correctly designated as the one in charge of updating the lessons learned register, but who had wrongly put the lessons learned register on his computer, my duty as a project director or the project manager was to make sure that I evaluate the effectiveness of artifact management. What is it that will cause this gentleman to ensure that the project artifact is no longer sitting in his computer, but it's on the shared drive, right? So we can go on to our project management plan and say that, well, to avoid such things happening, we're going to have a virtual meeting at the end of every week, and everybody is going to be logging onto the shared drive to look at the same document, and we are going to be reviewing our document, our lessons learned from there. That may be a way of effectively or making our artifact management more effective. All right. And again, it's your duty as a project manager to communicate the project status. So those are the things you think about when it comes to artifact management. All right. So I wanted us to, in 2 minutes or so, be thinking about this. Think of your current or most recent project and answer each question honestly. You can take a piece of paper. We're not going to share it. But can you locate the approved project charter within 2 minutes? Just think about it. A project you are involved in. Are you sure that you know exactly where the project charter is? You know what the project is about and who is doing what and the budget, and is this stated somewhere, or you were just told on phone? Or you were told at a team meeting, yes, we're going to run a new project, it's 5 million and it's Esther's project. The second thing you need to reflect on is your risk register updated within the last 30 days. The risk register of the project, and I mean you that is hearing me. So your risk register, the risk register for your project, has it been updated within the last 30 days? Or it's a risk register that is sitting in your head or in people's heads, and when we go for a meeting and we are thinking about risks, everybody starts to remember what risks we have. And perhaps somebody would have pulled a sheet of paper and started writing the risks that they have for the project, only to close it and put it aside. Now think about the next question. Does every team member know where to find your current project schedule? Think about it. A lot is wrong with projects around the world these days. And that is why when you become a PMP, you want to make sure you change the narrative. Okay. Now think about, can you name who is responsible for updating each key artifact? For me, that project engineer who unfortunately had that lessons learned on his computer, at least I know who he is. I know who is responsible for updating it. Now I'm thinking about your project. Do you know who is actually responsible for it? Now, if you left the project tomorrow, could your successor find everything within an hour? Or everything is on your private computer and in your head? If any of these answers is not what it's supposed to be, and you have correctly identified it's not what it's supposed to be, then be confident in yourself that you currently have some understanding of what project artifacts are and what your duty is as a project manager to ensure that the project's artifacts are properly managed. And this mindset is what takes you into the exam room and you're able to ace a question on artifacts and how you manage them. Remember, artifacts are not one-time deliverables. Okay, so lessons learned, even our risk register, when we do it at the beginning of the project, we don't just leave it there, right? Our risk register, when we do the risk register, we don't just leave it from the first day. We keep updating it. So if your last update was 2 months ago, then you're doing something wrong. Ownership must be distributed. When your PM owns all artifact stewardship by default, you have created a single point of failure, because when the project manager decides he's off sick or she's off sick, you are in trouble. Again, version control is a credibility mechanism. So if we have, let's say we have a risk register, which we did at the beginning of the year. Now, a whole lot of risks have been identified in the course of the year, but we've not updated it. Or we have updated it, but we have updated the risk register, but we have not renamed it. What do you think could happen? Somebody may be working off of a risk register an old risk register, a risk register from last year, which may not be relevant now, or which may be missing very serious risks that we must be looking through. So that's why it's important that we ensure that our artifacts have a version control on it. Okay, so that, and that even works in general general business, where if you do a document, let's say this presentation, well, if I was working on it and I decided to take a rest, and I came back to my computer, and instead of saving what I had done yesterday and then starting to work on it, I decided that, well, I'm going to overwrite everything I did yesterday. Then I will not have a reference point for what I'm doing now. So that's why it's important to do a revision. So it's actually a good skill to have. If you're a project manager, try to document every stage of the work. If you did the work today and it's you've ended the day with it, just say revision A, 11th of June 2026. If you came tomorrow and you pick the same document, save it revision B or whatever it is, 12th of June 2026. That way, if something crashed later on and you wanted to come back, you would know which particular revision of it you're dealing with. That is a practical thing that you do. So when you sit in the exam room and there is something that comes in that context, you know how you're going to manage it. So look at some of these. All of these are artifacts: your project charter, business case, scope document, milestone list. All of these are examples of project artifacts. Now, the key principle is that the artifact type and level of detail should be tailored to the project. What matters is that the artifacts exist and is current, has an owner, and is accessible to everyone. So the artifact that I had was a lessons learned register. I had an owner, which was the project engineer. The thing I was missing, which I had to correct, was that the artifact was wrongly on the computer of the person that had been designated. And as a project manager, it was my duty, and in fact, I did the duty of correcting the process of managing the artifacts and making sure that that action of it being kept on their own computer was corrected. So you see how it works in practice. All right. This is also an example of a change log, right? A change log. So you will have your own format of a change log. But if you can have an example like this, where you have an ID of the project, the description of the change, the description, what type of change. I told you a couple of minutes ago what kinds of changes we could have. Right, we could have a corrective action, we could have a preventive change, we could have a defect repair, we could have an update. All of these are sources. You don't need to memorize these. You just need to know that these are sources of project changes. Who requested it is an important factor there. What is the impact? As your change control board meets and reviews it, they will be able to assess what the impact is of the change and then decide the status. When the status is decided, whether approved or rejected, and the approval date and all of that, is your duty as a project manager or whoever it is you designate to then communicate the status of the changes to your project stakeholders. All right. So that is a key thing that you need to pick up from this. Right. Now let's look at the fourth task that I'm supposed to talk about today, which is removal of impediments and managing issues. We all know that an issue is a risk that has materialized. Okay, so as a project manager, you need to remove impediments and manage how issues are actually resolved. Okay, so the new exam content outline requires project manager to evaluate the impact of the impediments, prioritize and highlight them, and apply an intervention strategy and recognize when a risk becomes an issue. You need to recognize as soon as a risk becomes an issue, move it into the issues log and manage it there. Collaborate with stakeholders towards the resolution of those issues. So some of the enablers that need to be available are that you need to evaluate the impact of the impediment. All right. Prioritize the highlighted impediments. Determine and apply an intervention strategy to remove or minimize the impediment. Recognize when a risk becomes an issue, and then collaborate to get this thing out of the way. We had already talked about a risk, what a risk is, and what an issue is. And it's your duty to make sure that that issue that has become an impediment, that issue that is now preventing you from moving forward, has been evaluated in terms of impact, and we have a strategy on how we're going to get it done. Because remember, it became an issue because you did not, your response was not adequate to meet it. So now it means that as we sit now that the risk has become an issue, we need to resolve it. We need to have a way of resolving it, is that strategy, intervention strategy, to bring it back on track. I was managing a project in the US for a project that was happening in West Africa. So I had a team of people. I had a team of people from a couple of countries, and one of the impediments that had taken place, or one of the issues that had come up, was, I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, good. So one of the issues that had taken place was that we had anticipated that a vendor in Houston was going to provide some pipe work at a particular material grade, but unknown to us, because we did not request it earlier than than they anticipated. They had a bit of delay because they also had to import some stuff from elsewhere. So that risk of delays, which had been mitigated for, or which we had a solution for earlier, now there was an intervening event that would prevent us from being able to completely extinguish that risk. And so that risk became an issue. So we put it in an issue log to state that, look, the project is now going to be by 2 weeks because the materials are not available in the States. They have to be imported and they have to be manufactured, and the dog legs and all of that have to be actually relooked at. All right. So then we had to find a recovery plan. So we called it our recovery plan. We had to find a recovery plan. What are we going to do to fast track the project? So that's when I got one of the engineers, very, very good guy, a very big expert in piping, come up to say, okay, you know what we can do is that, because we want to, the end result is going to be taking place in West Africa. What we can do is that we want to evaluate, and then he used a parametric estimate from a template called John something. It's a template that actually looks at how long it takes to manufacture that kind of pipe based on your geography. So he looked at it. Well, if we're going to do this in Southeast Asia, it's going to take about 2 weeks. If we're going to continue this job in West Africa, it's going to take 3 weeks. All right. The materials are not available in West Africa. They are available in the States right now. It will take about 3 weeks to get it shipped over to West Africa. All right. So what is our recovery plan? While we are shipping it over to, first of all, we need to make sure there's a vessel that is going as soon as possible. We need to make sure we have lined up all the materials ready to go. We need to make sure we have a vendor in West Africa who can continue the work, which is the fabrication work, and they are geared up to actually do it in that record time. And then what are we going to do? Rearrange the project, sort of fast track it without impacting on the budget, So that is what we did. That's called the recovery plan. All right. So as a project manager, it is your duty to identify the issue, and remembering that the issue has come up because your initial plan didn't work. Your initial risk response didn't adequately cover it, or was not existent, that risk was not identified. And so you didn't have a solution when it happened. And so it has become an issue. So this is the pipeline. You identify and capture the potential risk. This is the transition from a risk to an issue. We all know that. So when you identify it at the beginning, it's in the risk register, right? You analyze the risk. That's where you do your, 5x5 risk matrix and say that, okay, what's the probability of this risk taking place? What's the impact if it takes place? And then you decide as a company or as a project manager what your risk appetite is and what your risk threshold is. All right. And then you decide, okay, based on what our risk appetite is, below a certain risk, we won't do anything. Below a certain impact, we'll just accept it. All right. And then if the impact is going to go above a certain level, then we must act. That is you analyzing. And then you can then respond to the risk. You can plan your risk response, whether you want to avoid the risk, you want to transfer it, you want to accept it, or you want to mitigate the risk. Then you look at how you monitor it while you are underway, the project is underway. But as you monitor it, you realize that the risk is about to, the risk you identified and the response you actually had put in place will not suffice to get the risk out of the way. So what happens? Your monitoring then helps you proactively make a strategic recovery when the risk becomes an issue. When a risk becomes an issue, remember, it is lodged, it sleeps in the issue log. It sits in the issue log. So a risk whose trigger has occurred is an issue, and it sits in the issue log. Now, you mentioned that I mentioned a lot of things relating to impediments, right? So an impediment is an obstacle that prevents the team from achieving its objective. Impediments slow or stop the progress. So in the project, in the stage where the materials were not ready because we didn't order them on time and they had long lead items that had to be dealt with, what we then had to do, the situation we had gotten ourselves into was a situation where the delay in the pipe work was an impediment to the project, the progress of the project. So that's how you look at impediments. Impediments slow or stop the progress. In adaptive context, they are surfaced at daily coordination meetings. So when you're running an agile project, I'm sure ACE's project and ultimately is going to be an agile or a hybrid project. So in such projects, you'd see that mostly they will be surfacing because you're going to have your debriefing session. You're going to you're going to have your stand-up meetings and talk about your updates and all of that. You will have blockers. You will state your blockers, what is holding up the project and what's preventing your project from progressing, right? So in adaptive context, you will see them on a daily basis, and it may be resolved by the Scrum Master or the project management manager. Teams maintain a separate impediment log. So you can have an issue log, but if that issue is stopping your project or slowing down your project, flag it as an impediment. And you may as well have an impediment log that you can look at and see where, if you want to release your project and let your project move forward, where you can have the most impact. Okay, now we know about our risks, right? We know our known, see, a risk is an uncertain event, which if it occurs could have a positive or negative impact on the project. Now, that risk could be a known unknown, or it could be an unknown unknown, or it could be a known. That's a fact. Okay, a fact. So look at all these classifications. A known unknown is a risk that we have identified. The fact that the second unknown is the fact that it's a risk, all right? Because we see a risk is an uncertain event, which if it occurs could have a positive or negative impact on the project. So if the unknown, which is the risk, is known, that is a classic risk that we have actually logged in our risk register. You could have an unknown, which at the beginning of the project was also unknown. When we sat as a team, we didn't identify that as a risk, so we didn't know it. That is an unknown risk. That's an unknown. All right. So when you have an unknown, remember that your project budget or your project baseline is made up of your cost baseline plus your plus your contingency, right? Do you remember that? You should remember it. Okay. And then beyond that, you also have your management reserve. Your management reserve covers the unknowns, the risks that we didn't know about. Okay. Then of course, so your known unknowns, which are your risks, are covered by your contingency. All right, your contingency reserves. And then the unknown unknowns are covered by your management reserves. You may have unknown knowns. The knowledge exists in the community, but not with the entity working on the project. So you don't know what the others already know. That's an unknown known. It's a fact, but it's hidden, and it's a risk. Now you can have a known, which is a fact and a requirement, and the original plan. It is managed as part of the scope. It's not a risk. It is something that we already planned for. Okay, so just to highlight them so that you can be able to distinguish them easily. I'll try and wrap up in 5 minutes, and then we can look at maybe 1 or 2 questions, and 1 or 2 practicum questions, and then I can get you to ask your questions as well. All right. You know what risks are, right? So we know that a risk can have a positive or a negative impact on the project. If the risk will have a negative impact on the project when it occurs, that risk is a threat. If the risk will have a positive impact on the project when it occurs, that risk is an opportunity. So an opportunity is also an uncertainty. And that is why it's a positive risk. That's why we talk about it. So you all know this already. I'm not going to belabor it. If you have an opportunity, you can exploit the opportunity. That is, you make sure the opportunity is realized. You can enhance it. That means you can increase the probability that the opportunity will take place. You can share it. That is, you can assign ownership of the opportunity to a third party. All right. You can escalate it. That is, you can pass the opportunity to a higher authority when it exceeds the project scope. And then you can accept the opportunity, take advantage of the opportunity. So think about the project you're working on and look at some of the opportunities and how you are responding to them. Are you exploiting them? Are you enhancing them? Are you sharing them? Are you escalating them? Are you accepting them? Or you are just doing nothing, letting the opportunity pass by? You could also have a threat, which is a risk which would have a negative impact on the project. And what do you do for threats? You avoid them. You can avoid them. You can mitigate them. That is, reduce the probability of it occurring. You can transfer it. When you transfer it, let somebody handle that risk. That means, so example is giving putting your project on an insurance. You have transferred the risk. All right. And then you can escalate it, pass it on to a higher authority, or accept the risk and say, hey, Sarah. So what it is what it is. Let's get it done. Now, let's take you to one last thing before I wrap up. I'm going to take you to the issue triage. You know what the triage is? When you go to the clinic, the first place that the nurses get you to stand on the scale and try to get your temperature and the like, and try to get all the information that they need of you, right? So that is the triage. So I'm going to take you to the issue triage, and we're going to try something out. And note that all of these simulations and interactive tools are things that we have developed in SigmaStrat as part of our learning process. Where most of these, we make them available for free to people that are interested in it. So Kelvin would have put a link on there. If you're interested in getting that, you can provide details, and we will be able to share those with you. So any of the tools you're interested in, and most of them are without any cost. So we'll make them available if you join that that group. Okay, so this, for instance, it is an artifact that we've developed with Claude. All right, and Claude is one of the AI tools that is really very resourceful. As part of our PECs for training, we actually help people understand AI a bit more, and we make use of it during our project management training. So let's look at this as an issue triage. So an issue has come to the hospital lobby. We're testing the temperature. We are assigning them to doctors and assigning them to, you know, how we are going to operate them. So select an issue, assign it to a quadrant, then review the expert response strategy. Okay, so select an issue. So we'll select this issue, a key sponsor. Let me show you this issue. A key sponsor has been unreachable for 3 weeks. The sector is a government infrastructure project. Okay, so what do I want to do with this issue? It has materialized. Initially, it was a risk that a project sponsor may not be available. And what I had done was to keep him updated, you know, keep him close, call him for meetings, or get to his office for the meetings and all that. But unfortunately, he's unreachable. Now I can't get him, and it's been 3 weeks. What do you think I should do? What should we do? Where should we put them? Should we delegate that responsibility of trying to reach the project sponsor? Should I act now? Immediate PM action, that is perhaps speak to the project sponsor and get some direct action, you know, access to him. Do I just monitor and see whether he comes next week? Do I plan something? So tell me what you think we should do. What do you think? Anybody? So tell me, do you want me to delegate management? No, it's not contingent. Okay, no. Yeah. Do you want me to what do you want me to do? Oh, the line broke. Okay. You want to act now, right? Okay. So somebody says act now. Let's see what we do. Act now. Okay. So we want to act now, right? Let's see. Let me reveal the expert response. Show the strategy. Act now. Key sponsor is unreachable for 3 weeks. So your act now is that we should escalate immediately to the program director, invoke the governance escalation path, assign interim decision-making authority so that the project does not stall. So your decision as an expert there, or your expert opinion, is that we should act now because this situation is going to stall your project, right? The project sponsor is not responding. So you have decided to analyze it in your issue triage. You are trying to decide where it goes, and you've decided now to act now. Let's try that for, let's say, this other issue. A non-conformance report is filed, substandard rebar or bridge deck. So in Ghana, there's construction that is going on one of the highways. It's called the Accra Tema Motorway, and there's quite some very interesting structural work that is being done. let's assume for a moment that there is a small defect and somebody in the project team has written a non-conformance report. Substandard rebar on the bridge deck. It's an issue. What do you want us to do? Where should we put this issue? You are the project manager. What will you do? Are you going to monitor it? Are you going to plan a response? What do you want to do? This is going to be the last interactive exercise. So what will you want to do? Let me see what you think. Okay, Benjamin Enyiri says I should act now. Okay, we'll go with you, Benjamin. You say we should act now. Okay. So we're going to act now on that. So for the NCR, the strategy there will be issue a stop work notice on the affected session, convene an emergency technical review, document every action taken for the contractual for the contractual record. All right. So that is acting now. When we're constructing the motorway, there's a non-conformance report that has been filed. So if we decide to act now, that acting now means that we are going to issue a stop work notice immediately and convene an emergency technical meeting and then document everything that has to take place. Let's assume, let's take one more and decide, okay, meeting room conflicts. That's also an issue. Meeting room conflict for stakeholder workshop. What do you think? What do you think? If you say plan a response, look at the strategy. Delegate to admin and resolve within 24 hours. This is not a PM level issue and should not assume PM bandwidth. This is the whole idea behind this interactive tool. So if for those of you who become sign up for these free tools that we'll be developing and all of that, you'll be able to play around with these and be able to tune your mind as to what you have to do. I mean, a meeting room conflicting is not something that you have to be, foisted upon. You probably want to delegate that. Get one of your team analysts to work on project team project meeting locations and the like. All right, let me quickly jump back to my slide, and as I wrap up, let me jump to my slide and wrap up. Okay. Okay, so Essie, you have a question? Essie, did you have a question? Okay, Essie's not speaking now, so let me go quickly.
I was muted.
Just 2 minutes.
I was muted. That is why you couldn't hear me. The speaker was just activated. Yeah, I was saying that when you started with the triage, the questions you were asking, I couldn't understand. I realized I was thinking it's the question you were reading, and I realized you started reading people's answers, so I couldn't follow the 3 questions you asked. So I was thinking you wanted our opinion.
Oh, okay.
Because of the way you presented it. So we didn't, actually, I'm here with a friend. We couldn't really follow. Okay.
The
way you were asking the questions and whether you were mentioning answers for us to select.
Okay. So the triage is an interactive tool that helps that helps you to develop a project management mindset as to what to do, what you can delegate, what you must actually do. So that triage, which was an interactive tool, was only the questions I was asking were to get your ideas as to what you would do in such a situation. So I'm just going to for your sake, go on to it and try the last one for the triage. Okay, so you can follow. Let's go to the issue triage, and this is this is not a paid thing. It's something that we developed with Claude, and we're doing a few more of those. So let me go back to that triage and help. Good. All right. So you can see, can you see the screen, AC?
It's now loading.
Okay. All right. It will load in a jiffy and then will be good. Can you see it?
Yes.
Good. All right. So this issue triage, the instruction here is select an issue, assign it to a quadrant, then review the expert response strategy. All right. So this is a way you try to see whether you are thinking like you know, you're thinking the way PMI is expecting you to think when it comes to issues. So what we're trying to do is we said that, okay, let's select a few issues. So we built it to have just 5 issues, and then you test yourself. So we found out, we took one scenario. I said, if a key sponsor is unreachable for 3 weeks, what will you do? Are you going to delegate it to a team member and see what he does when the thing is actually affecting your project? Are you going to act now, or are you just going to do the wait and see? Maybe next week he's going to be reachable. And a few people said act now. So we selected act now. When we did select the issue key sponsor, there we decided act now. Okay. And then we went and reviewed what the strategy means and what actually the expert opinion is, that you are escalating immediately to the program director. Act now. That's what exactly you're doing. That's what you say, act now. Escalate immediately to the program director, invoke the governance escalation path, assign interim decision-making authority so that the project does not stall. So you have correctly assigned the issue to its right position. Remember, the selection of the position is based on the urgency and the impact. So if the urgency of the problem is very low, the impact is very low, your natural incline is to just monitor it. If the urgency is high and the impact is high, like a key stakeholder, your project sponsor not being responsive over 3 weeks, and you need some authorization for a certain change to occur, it's very high impact. It's a very high urgency. So immediately you have to act, right? So that's what you've put there. So now we are saying that as a project manager, if you decided to act now, what it means to you is that you have escalated it immediately to the project director, and you have invoked the governance escalation path and said, and now all of you have agreed on the next decision-making path. So for instance, take it this way: your online or your software project or your government project, your main liaison person was the minister. Now, the minister is gone to West Africa Parliament or, ECOWAS Parliament. But he's away for 3 weeks. The project is also time bound. Now, this is a risk you had identified before. In case the minister is not available, what do we do? And you thought about it at the earlier stages, that when the minister is not available, what I'll because I know the minister may not be available, I have accepted that risk. Your response of accepting that risk was because at the same time you thought that you had mitigated you had put an alternative there that if the minister is not available, you will have a Teams meeting with the minister. Now, this risk, which you had reduced its probability of occurring, has still materialized, has become, the trigger has materialized, and it has become an issue. Now the minister has gone to ECOWAS Parliament. From there, he's going to South Africa to speak to MultiChoice. And then at the end of the day, he comes, at the end of the day, you don't have access to him. All right. So what do you do? What do you do? Now your risk has become an issue. And it is very urgent that you get his response because your project is also tied to time. So what do you do? And this is what the triage for your risk basically is: you analyzing your risk, a way of you deciding what to do when your risk materializes into an issue. And we said that because this is a high urgency, high impact situation, you decided to act now. And acting now, your intuition is that you have escalated it immediately to the project director. You invoke the government escalation path, assign interim decision-making authority. So now your decision-making authority is that the deputy minister is going to be approving it so that you can proceed with your project. So just for your sake, let's look at this particular issue. 2 senior engineers resigned mid-sprint. You're developing a software update, and then 2 engineers have resigned mid-sprint. So actually, how urgent is this to you, to your project? Imagine a project, and what's the impact? 2 senior engineers. Is it low urgency?
So because it is midstream, it's high impact because the phase at which they have resigned is a critical stage. Right. So it's high impact. And talking about the kind of people that have resigned, senior engineers, it means they have some expertise.
Good.
And have some authority over the project when it comes to decision making. So I will go for act now.
You say act now. Good. So yes. In this your triage.
But I have a question here. When you started referring to this, you indicated that we should think like the way PMI thinks. And PMI normally doesn't like immediately now. They want you to analyze the situation first, or you log the situation and analyze it before you act based on the situation. That is why I didn't understand the answers that people were picking. But now I understand that you are using the triage to make the scenarios.
Good. And I think you've even answered the question, because what you did was, before you decided on what to do, you told me the reason. That's you analyzing. Remember that before, this issue is in your issue log. So you have identified the issue as having come out of your risk, and that issue is sitting in your issue log. Now you are deciding to act on the issue or respond to the issue or have your strategy, your response strategy. So what you told me, you actually had a strategy to it. You said that these guys are 2 senior engineers. These people's impact is high because they have knowledge. It is also very urgent because it's happening mid-sprint. Our project is presumed to be ongoing, so you want to act now. So you see, you went through a process, which is the PMI thinking. Unknown to you, you were actually doing it. So that shows that shows where you are sitting in terms of that mindset, that you are actually doing that as an analysis to conclude on what response strategy you want to put in place. So that's a kudos. So this triad can be developed by yourself, but what we've done, we've developed it. We'll be sharing it with those who are interested in it. So if you are, Kelvin has put a link there. You can provide your detail, and then such tools will be made available to you. So now let me just wrap up because I think I have exceeded my time, but very important. Good. Very important. Also, what's exactly the active avoiding? Good. Okay. Okay. All right. So there are a few questions. Okay, good. I like the feedback. Kelvin is taking note of the feedback. Thank you for the session and all. AC said, also have a question. Also have a question. What exactly is the act of avoiding a risk? Which type of risk warrants avoidance? Which type of risk warrants avoidance? You remember when we were talking about what a risk is, or the ways of dealing with risks. We talked about avoidance, we talked about mitigation, we talked about transfer, we talked about a few more. And AC wants to know, if you say you are avoiding that uncertain event, which if it occurs could have a positive or negative impact on the project, what are you actually doing? You see, the risk, let's take the risk as that event. If you decide, AC, to avoid that risk, that uncertain event, that means you are going to change your approach to the project so that that uncertainty is completely out of your way. So if by using Mango OD or by using GitHub in your software development, you stand a risk of having a limited storage space. You can decide to avoid it and decide that, no, I'm not using GitHub, I'm using an alternative. That is you avoiding it. Okay, so that is the whole idea. You can avoid it, or you can say that I've accepted it. GitHub has a size limitation, so I've accepted it. When that risk comes, I will buy more space, or I will add on this other storage. That is you accepting it. You can also decide, I'm going to mitigate that risk. I'm going to reduce the impact of that risk when it occurs. All right. So instead of using just GitHub, I'm going to have a configuration where I'll have GitHub and another platform doing the same job. All right. So that is you reducing the impact if the negative effect occurs. All right. And recently my team were working on software, and they wanted the system to send details or send an email response when a scenario occurs. So they decided one of the tools they were going to use was Resend. But then one of the features they wanted on that software was that every request also comes with an email notification. And that meant that the Resend subscription doesn't have to be the standard subscription. It has to be a premium subscription so that we will have a lot more email access. So that means that the risk of some emails dropping because we have a basic subscription, we have accepted it. And we've decided that then we will invest in a subscription that gives us access to more email access. All right. So that's basically it. Let me just wrap up on this before I sorry. I think there is merrymaking.
It's this PMP stuff, classes and all of that.
All right. So finally, we've gone through the triage. I'll probably make this available to those who are interested. So now just let's look at this quote I've put, the escalation courage. You remember I told you about you know, the tax of not reporting, you know, not your change management, the change management tax, where you decide not to document changes and you just let them pass. And I said that the things under the waterline may come back to bite you. So escalation courage is one thing I want you to look at. In high power distance organization, where you know there's a big distance between the you know, the person in authority and the person executing, which describes most corporate environments across Ghana, Nigeria, East Africa. Project managers hesitate to escalate issues to sponsors or steering committees. They don't want to look bad. They don't want things to look like they are not okay, because they think that the higher authority may not appreciate the full picture. The result is that issues fester. They are absorbed into informal workarounds and only surface when they have become crisis. So it's important that you actually have escalation courage. The fact that you are escalating does not mean you are not a good project manager. It is when you escalate as soon as the issue occurs is when we are talking about that. That's not what we expect. We expect you to assess the issue, have your issue response strategy. If the strategy goes beyond a threshold that is outside of your control, then you escalate, right? So this is a cultural pattern with a structural solution. Documented governance escalation paths, defined thresholds, and a PM who is willing to use them at what separate a governed project from a managed crisis. What I'm saying here is that when you are escalating, you're not doing bad. You need to have a documented governance escalation path. So in a project like ACE's project or the simulated triage that we could say that, yes, our governance escalation path is that if we don't have access to the minister, we will have access to the deputy minister. So in our project communication plan, we'll say we'll communicate to the minister. In the alternative, we'll communicate to the deputy minister. That way, when there is an issue like what we saw in the triage, we know straightforward that when we look in our project management plan, we will see that the next escalation path is the deputy project, the deputy minister. Escalate is a formally recognized risk response strategy. All right. So it appears for both the threats and opportunities. You can escalate them. All right. So when you escalate, you've not done anything wrong. All right. So just to end, we'll just do a practicum, which is actually a part of your preparation. So just a last one. It's practicum is just you doing a practical exam, a practical question. Okay, so let's do this together as we close, and then after that, I'll be in for five extra minutes if you have more questions. So I'm looking for my tools. Okay, good. All right, practicum questions. Do you see my screen? Okay, you do see my screen. I'm sure you do see. If you see my screen, you can give me a thumbs up because I want to wrap up in 5. Can you see my screen? Kelvin, can you see my screen? I'm not seeing the. You can?
We can see your screen.
Perfect,
Yes.
perfect. Okay, good. So this is a practicum question. So managing project change is a scenario case. So this scenario we've actually dealt with, but let me look at it again. You're a PM on a 14-man government road project in Accra, 6 months down the line. Okay, let me. 6 months down the line, the technical director calls you informally. We want to widen the carriageway and all of that. It's a small change, just add it. The contractor has mobilized and the current design is fully approved. No written request has been submitted. What is the most appropriate first action? Anybody, just type your answer quickly. In the exam, you know you just have about a minute to answer it. So the ones you have quick answers to, you quickly put it to work. Good. Good. What's your answer? All right. So C. Okay, I'm going to go with anything you say is the answer. Inform the technical director that all scope changes. Hey, a lot of people are voting C. It better be correct. Inform the technical director that all scope changes must follow the approved change control. That's what I'll choose to. Okay, let's check our answer. Rationale. That's correct. Informal scope additions, regardless of how they are framed, must enter the change control process before any action is taken. Option A starts with without authorization. Look at how we are eliminating the answers. That will help you as a cue. Option A starts without authorization, because when you choose instruct the contractor to begin planning for additional lane to avoid schedule delays, they've intentionally said avoiding schedule delays, but your focus should be on the ball. Keep your eyes on the ball. You are supposed to make sure that it goes through a change control process. Option B, defer formalization and option B defers formalization and creates a live risk, because if you thank the project director and note it as a verbal scope addition to be formalized later, you are deferring formalization, and PMI wants you to document stuff. So that's why B will not be the answer. D delays formal documentation while starting informal analysis. Remember, AC was talking about assessing the impact. If you think about assessing the impact without thinking about documenting it, you may get it wrong. So assess the impact informally and present options to the technical director before submitting anything informal. You see, if you put yourself in a cultural mood, you may be confused between C and D and say, oh yeah, the minister has spoken to me. Let me assess the impact and then show the minister what the options are. That is wrong. You need to inform the technical director. You need to go through your line of command that all scope changes must follow the approved change control process before any action is taken. Let's go to the next question. This is a medium question, not too hard. A project team is executing a hybrid infrastructure project. Mid-delivery, several informal scope changes have been absorbed by the team members, responding directly to the client requests. The PM discovers this during a status review. Which two actions should the PM take first? This is a precarious situation. You're running a hybrid project, and then midway, several informal scope changes have been absorbed by team members. Team members are doing their own, they are going on their own frolics, accepting changes, modifying stuff. That must be a very serious situation to be in. So what do you think? Somebody says D. Okay, you have two slots. So somebody says A and D. I'm going to choose anything you choose, but we're going to have the answer. So document all the informal changes retrospectively and submit change requests for each. Are we then backdating? Think about it this way. Are we backdating stuff? Are we just making props? Immediately halt all project work until a full scope review is complete. Does this link to what AC was talking about? Assessing the status quo before moving forward. Do you want to take a step back, look at what is happening, and then move forward? Council team members privately and redirect future scope requests through the PM. So what happens to the old changes that have been informally implemented? So this is where I'll cancel out C. Issue a formal communication to all stakeholders reaffirming the change control process. Okay, but that is for the future. What happens to the past? Okay, remove the team members who accepted the informal changes from the project. What does this have to say about servant leadership? Are we going to do training for the team members? Are we going to inform the team members? Are we going to kick them out? So I'm going to look at the answers randomly and pick the one that the ones that got the most votes. I see a lot more A's and I see a lot of D's. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay. A is correct. Informal changes already absorbed must be documented and formally assessed. Ignoring them creates audit and delivery risk. D is correct. The PM must restore the governance environment by communicating the change process clearly to all parties. B is disproportionate, immediately halting the work, because you remember it will have an impact on the project schedule, right? So you have two wrongs to deal with. All right. C addresses team behavior, but is not the highest priority at this moment. Right? This is team behavior, counseling the team and all of that. But even that, doing that privately and not dealing with the real problem is a problem. Then E is punitive and counterproductive. So you should see that E is gone out of the way. And so that's the reason why the two are the case. So that basically brings us to the end. I don't want to bore you with too many more questions. So let's do the last one and then we'll be out of the way. A project manager joins a project that is already 40% complete. During onboarding, they find a project charter dated 18 months ago at version 1.0. A risk register last updated 4 months ago. 2 different versions of the project schedule, one on SharePoint and one on the PM's personal folder, and no record of who is responsible for updating any of these documents. Which artifact management issue reflects the highest risk to the project? Tell me. Which artifact management issue represents the highest risk to the project? See, everything is everything is all over the place. Project charter is 18 months old. It's still at revision 1. Risk register was not updated after 4 months. So 4 months ago was the last time it was updated. 2 different versions of this, no record of who is responsible for updating any of them. What do you think? Yeah. D. Actually, I see a lot of D's, a lot more D. So let's go to D and quickly wrap up. No documented ownership exists for artifact updates. So all risks. Okay, let's see the answer. Each artifact issue is real, but the absence of documented ownership is the root cause that perpetuates all others without ownership assignment. The outdated charter stays outdated, the risk register remains still, and the schedule version keeps diverging. Option A, B, and C are symptoms. D is a systematic failure. You get it? So all of these are symptoms of the problem. But the failure here we have is that we don't know who is in charge of it. So that will be the first thing I would do as a project manager to make sure that I have somebody in charge of it. Then we'll clean up the rest of the mess. So this brings us to the end of the session. I would want to wrap up. So basically, what we have covered is to talk about the fact that you have changes that take place constantly. The fact that there are changes doesn't mean you're a poorly project manager. But if you are a project manager and you can't manage the process of changes, then that is where you have a problem. We've also learned that there are symptoms that are below the iceberg that we need to look out for. All of those culminate in changes. So the best thing as a project manager to do is to ensure that you have a process in place to manage the process of managing change, so that when change events occur, they are routed through it, and nothing must escape that project change control process. Then we looked at artifacts. We looked at examples of artifacts. your documents and all of that. And we said that you need to decide which artifacts to use when you need to decide how you document those artifacts, how you record them, where they are stored, who is in charge of it, and all of that. You need to be able to work through those and label them properly. Then we went through the issues triage by way of how we manage our issues, what actions we put in place to as our response strategies to issues that have risks that are materialized into issues. All right. And then we went through some practical questions. Basically, projects don't fail because of lack of plans. We have the plans. But usually when the process discipline for ensuring that changes that occur have been properly assessed and will have minimal impact on the project don't exist, then the project will fail. All right. So that is what we covered today. And hopefully you've been able to pick up a thing or two about how we run our projects in the midst of changes, how we document our artifacts, and how we manage risks. Kelvin has put a few of the the things I mentioned in forms of quotes. You can pick it and you can share it. You can use it on your status. You can reflect on it. You can save it as a photo on your phone and think about it. And that brings us to the end of this session. I hope you did enjoy it. And for those who decide who want to keep in touch, you have access to my LinkedIn profile. My handle is Emmanuel A. Hazel. So you can connect with me and we can share ideas together. For those who have joined the who have provided their email details, we will share with you some of the free resources, the free tools that we are working with. And then for those who also want to keep in touch with us, I'm sure Kelvin has provided the necessary information. So on this note, I'll say thank you all for your time, and I hope you enjoyed it. If there are any questions, we can take it. We can take those questions before I hand over. So Kelvin has put my LinkedIn handle there. Thank you, Kelvin. Right. Any questions? Yeah. So if you need access to the information, we'll provide it to you. All of these are free pieces of information, free tools. So you can practice them, you can use them, and as and when our team develops more, we're working on a software project, an app that will help as well. And when that becomes available, we'll share that with you. Ezra McPherson, you've got a question.
Hello, sir. Emmanuel, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I seem to have a problem. It says you can't send messages because you are not a member of the chat. I don't know what's happening there. So I just want to put in my email address so I can get those tools that you were planning on sharing.
Okay. All right. Oh, okay. Other people have joined using the group link. Okay. All right. So we'll give you, well, yeah. So you sent your email, right?
I can't put it in the chat.
Oh, you can't put it in the chat.
Yeah, it says I'm not a member of the chat. I don't know where that came from, but
okay. All right. So but do you see the link? There's a link. Kelvin, do you want to put the link over there so that he can fill in his detail, the Google form? If he fills in his detail, the team can share with him all the information. Kelvin, so Kelvin is going to post the link again, or you can scroll back down to the link. Yeah. Good. So Kelvin has done that. Okay. So there is a form for there's another Google form for those who need more information. And then there's a WhatsApp message also. Put that other link there as well. Okay, so Ezra, I've taken note of that. If you for those of you who want to take my contact, you can do that. I've just put that down here. +2332435000629. You can connect with me on WhatsApp. Over the next couple of months, we'll be in Botswana, Cape Town. We'll be in a couple of countries, Sierra Leone, and a few countries, delivering in-person project management training. And we also do have online versions of the training that are going to take place. Our next one's taking place from the 20th of June. So you can tell your friends and they'll be able to join. Oh, congrats, Baba. He passed his PMP exam on 8 June. This session is really helpful. Oh, great. So yeah, he passed his exam. Baba, congrats. All right.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. So I'll hand over back to you, Amy.
Okay. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. This was such a very helpful session, and I believe the candidates also managed to at least get something from it as well. Feel free to reach out to Emmanuel, and if you have any follow-up questions. I know we've gone over time by about 28 minutes, but it was all worth it, I hope. And feel free to contact Emmanuel directly if you want more engagement. He has a few good tools and resources that is shared here, and I think he has more. Feel free to contact him directly. We will share this recording hopefully tomorrow, and we'll also share the schedule for next week for the webinars. We have more webinars next week on Tuesday and Thursday. And for those sitting for the exams before then, wishing you all the best. Please share your congratulations, or share once you part so that we can congratulate you in the WhatsApp groups as well. And have a good evening, good afternoon, and thank you so much, Emmanuel and Kelvin.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and we hope to be of support to any of you who would be requiring the support. So thank you, and have a blessed evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Mano. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You guys have a good one.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.